News at 1 o'clock now on BBC One with Kate Silverton.
Police say they've foiled an active terror plot in London. One suspect, a woman in her 20s, was shot and is in a serious condition. In a major security operation, armed police surrounded a property in northwest London and have arrested 6 people, including one in Kent.
The armed entry was necessary due to the nature of the intelligence we were dealing with and involved armed officers firing CS gas into the address.
It's understood the man arrested in Whitehall yesterday is Mohammed Khalid Omar Ali, who's 27 and originally from North London. We will have the very latest live on both those stories, also this lunchtime. Britain's economy slowed sharply at the start of the year. Official figures show GDP grew by just 0.3%. A fund set up to improve access to cancer drugs in England has been condemned by researchers as a huge waste of money. Sergeant Alexander Blackman, the former Royal Marine jailed for shooting dead a wounded Taliban fighter in Afghanistan, is released from prison. And MPs accuse the car maker Vauxhall of showing a reckless disregard for safety over the way it handled a series of fires with its Severa B model.
Later on BBC London, campaigners claim the Garden Bridge project is dead after the mayor refuses to back it. And what will Brexit mean for Surrey's award-winning vineyards and wine merchants?
Hello, very good afternoon to you. Welcome to the BBC News at 1. Police say they've foiled an active terrorist plot after carrying out an armed raid in northwest London. A female suspect was shot during the operation and is in a serious but stable condition in hospital. 6 people have been arrested on suspicion of the commission, preparation and instigation of terrorist acts. 2 women, 2 men and a 16-year-old boy were arrested at or near the property yesterday evening. Another woman was detained in Kent. Police said the operation was unconnected to the arrest yesterday of a 27-year-old man armed with knives in Westminster. Richard Gulpin reports.
Early yesterday evening in northwest London, and armed police begin their raid on a house here. The gunshots sparking alarm in the neighbourhood.
As I made my way to the living room, I heard bang, bang, bang. So I ran to the front window, obviously, see what was happening, and then I saw the police officers aiming. So I ran to my partner in the kitchen. I was like, quick, quick, there's armed officers outside, there's armed officers. At that point, you heard another bang, another bang.
The Sun newspaper obtained this amateur video showing some of the armed officers pointing their weapons at the house. By the end of the operation, 5 people had been arrested here. And this appears to show officers attending to someone outside the house. The police have said they shot and seriously injured a woman. They believe they foiled an active terrorist plot.
Last night at approximately 7 p.m, our highly trained firearms officers carried out a specialist entry into an address in Harlesden Road. We had that under observation as part of a current counter-terrorism investigation. The armed entry was necessary due to the nature of the intelligence we were dealing with and involved armed officers firing CS gas into the address. During the course of that operation, one of the subjects, a woman, was shot by police. She remains in hospital. I can say that her condition is serious, but it is stable.
It's thought to be the first time a woman has been shot by the police for a decade, and it's now being investigated by the Independent Police Complaints Commission. Meanwhile, the police have been searching 3 more houses in London, including here in Willesden, where yesterday's raid took place. Earlier yesterday, there'd been another incident in central London. A 27-year-old man arrested by armed police near Downing Street and the Foreign Office in a separate counter-terrorism operation, which was apparently intelligence-led. Nearby they found a rucksack with knives inside.
This is the way that we prevent terrorism. What you've seen today and yesterday is police preventing a terrorist attack. Now that's really important because when a person gets to the point of blowing themselves up or shooting people, it's too late. We're just going to have victims. What we need to do is, exactly as we saw yesterday, police intervening before the attack happens.
This has been a traumatic period for Londoners. Memories are still fresh of the 5 people killed in the attack near Parliament just a few weeks ago. And now it seems the police are uncovering many more alleged plots in the capital. Richard Galpin, BBC News.
Well, our Home Affairs correspondent Daniel Sanford is in Willesden for us in North West London, of course. And just bring us up to date on what we've been learning this morning, Daniel.
Well, first of all, I think it is significant the large number of people arrested in this operation. We've obviously seen recently the lone actors, as it were, of the Westminster Bridge attack and the suspected lone actor of the man arrested on Whitehall yesterday. But this was a suspicion of something that was a bit more than that, with several people involved. So this began as an intelligence operation, and with some rather specific intelligence that suggested that the possibility of something dangerous inside the house, and that's why, quite unusually these days for a counter-terrorism operation, a lot of armed officers were present. What you got was essentially an entry using CS canisters. So the police have put in CS canisters actually through the top window of the house, and that's immobilised the people inside. That's then allowed the armed officers to go into the house to make their arrests. But at some point during that operation, this woman has clearly been shot, and talking to neighbours here, she was screaming in pain after being shot, and the police were saying to her, if you'll just stay still, we will be able to help you. She didn't appear to want to be touched after having been shot. She was then taken away in an ambulance for treatment. 6 people have now been arrested. That doesn't include her. I think it's inevitable that she will be arrested, but police are going to let her have treatment first. She's still, as I understand it, in a serious but stable condition. 6 people in custody, and it'll take some time, I think, before we understand exactly what the nature of the alleged plot was that these people were accused of being involved in.
Daniel, thank you very much. Well, we're joined now by our Home Affairs correspondent, June Kelly, because there's been a development in yesterday's arrest of a man charged with being in possession of offensive weapons in Westminster. The police have stressed it's unconnected, June, but what are you able to tell us?
Yes, Kate, the man arrested yesterday we now know is Mohammed Khalid Omar Ali. He's 27 and he went to school in Tottenham in North London. We know that he is a British national, but it's believed he wasn't born in the UK. Now, this was a man who was on the radar of the police and the security service MI5, but it's understood that it was a tip-off from a concerned family member which led armed police to move in on him yesterday and arrest him in that very dramatic way. And we know that a number of knives, of course, were recovered from the scene. We saw the shots of the knives on the pavement close to his rucksack. He is now in custody at a high-security London police station, and meanwhile, searches are going on at 2 addresses in London.
June, thank you. Well, there's been a sharp slowdown in the UK's economic growth, according to official figures for the beginning of the year. The economy grew by just 0.3% in the first 3 months of 2017, worse than predicted. And the slowdown was particularly marked in the service and retail sectors, previously engines of growth. Our correspondent Andy Verity reports.
This sector is now the bright spot of our economy. This Shrewsbury-based manufacturer makes internal parts for cars from Land Rovers to the Nissan Qashqai. The drop in the value of the pound before and after the Brexit vote should have helped business a lot, because it's cheaper for foreign buyers paying dollars or euros to buy the cars that these parts go into. But even here, new orders aren't growing as quickly as they did a year ago.
There's potential customers with orders who are saying, look, let's just wait for 12 months and see what happens with Brexit, see what happens with tariffs, see whether we can buy from the UK or buy from Europe. And what we're saying is, look, we will continue to invest, we will continue to grow. What we need is a bit more commitment from the government to get the deal done.
Business leaders keep trying to tell politicians Brexit-led uncertainty is slowing down new orders for their goods and putting off big companies from investing.
The figures are ominous, and they do suggest that the way the British economy has been kept afloat since the Brexit vote, with a lot of consumer spending supported by credit, high house prices, that this is not really sustainable.
Political opponents sought to play up or play down the significance of the slowdown.
I think the biggest cause for concern at the moment is the uncertainty. Lots of businesses are saying to me, we need greater clarity from the government. What's its position really?
I mean, I think the GDP figures should be setting alarm bells ringing. And it underlines the importance of making sure that there are voices there arguing for a common sense outcome.
The government was far more upbeat.
Britain's economy is forecast to grow at 2% this year. Employment is at record highs and it's set to go higher still. The British economy is resilient.
For years it's been retail that's driven economic growth, but now consumers are hitting the brakes.
Well, when we look at the figures, there is a sense that the economy is stabilising at a very strong level. But when we look at the underlying drivers, the fact that the consumer is starting to now give in some of the strength that we saw in 2016 could be a signal that things are about to turn. There is a strong sense that we're at a turning point for the economy.
If you're an optimist, the shift from consumer spending to manufacturing is welcome, a rebalancing the previous government tried but failed to achieve. But that won't be much comfort to households whose real incomes, once again, are shrinking. Andy Verity, BBC News, Shrewsbury.
Well, there's also been a drop in house prices, the second month in a row, according to Nationwide Building Society. With us then to discuss that, our personal finance correspondent Simon Gompetz. What's the significance then?
Well, if it's that reason that the Nationwide is pointing to, that families are feeling squeezed, they're seeing price rises in the shops and therefore have less to spend on property, then that is significant because it's likely to carry on for some time. Now, it's not unusual for there to be a drop in house prices in a month, but have a look at what's happening, because in April, the latest month, they were down 0.4%, but then the previous month, March, they were down as well, 0.3%. And it hasn't happened 2 months consecutively for nearly 5 years. Year on year, prices are up 2.6%, but again, that's the lowest rate for several years. Now, just take a look at the average house price, and here's another possible reason: £207,000. It's got up to a very high level. London, the southeast, some big cities as well. Price is just unaffordable for some people, so they have to moderate, and stamp duty for some of the highest priced houses is very high. That's discouraging people from moving. Now, there's one piece of good news for house buyers. Mortgages are at their cheapest ever, so that's an encouragement, gives them more to spend. But on the other hand, lenders are being told to be much more careful about who they lend to, checking income, expenditure, and it's a good thing that people shouldn't overstretch themselves, but that's another factor that's a bit of a dampener on the market.
All right, thank you. UKIP's leader Paul Nuttall has launched his party's campaign for the general election, describing it as the Brexit election and a great opportunity for UKIP. Mr Nuttall refused to confirm which seat he will be standing in, promising an announcement tomorrow, as our political correspondent Eleanor Garnier reports.
Some say there's never a dull day with UKIP.
UKIP want to blame migrants, they want to blame refugees, and they want to blame Muslims for the problems in society.
Protesters from Stand Up to Racism did their best to ruin UKIP's campaign launch. But the party leader, Paul Nuttall, is determined to remain upbeat.
We will be bold and lead the debate. We will continue to set the agenda.
He's promising UKIP would cut immigration substantially and slash the foreign aid budget, raise defence spending, put more police on the streets and ban women wearing full face veils, prompting accusations UKIP itself is sowing division.
Actually, it's all about equality. It's all about breaking down barriers. It's all about integrating people in society. Because, as you know, a number of reports recently have shown, Trevor Phillips, Dame Casey, have shown that integration is failing. Communities are becoming more and more divided.
But was June 2016 the party's peak? Since the referendum result, UKIP's been troubled by division. It's had 3 different leaders. The party's only MP, Douglas Carswell, has quit. And its 20 MEPs will soon be redundant because of Brexit. Many have said there's now no point to UKIP having won the EU referendum. But the party insists it is needed to keep the pressure on the Prime Minister and ensure she delivers on UKIP's vision of Brexit.
UKIP will go into this election with clear policies. It will go into this election
with distinctly radical policies, whether that's on immigration, whether that's on British culture, whether that's on constitutional reform, whether that's on the NHS and defence spending and whatnot. There'll be a clear difference, clear blue water, between where UKIP stands and the other political parties.
He's insisted he will stand, though won't yet reveal where. But it is perhaps significant the party thinks it should give way in certain marginal seats to give the so-called real Brexiteers from whatever party the best chance of getting elected. Eleanor Garnier, BBC News, Westminster.
A special fund set up to improve patient access to cancer drugs in England has been condemned as a huge waste of money. The Cancer Drugs Fund, which ran from 2010 until it was replaced last year, cost more than £1.2 billion, but researchers say the majority of drugs failed to show clinical benefit. Our medical correspondent Fergus Walsh has more.
The Cancer Drugs Fund was set up to pay for expensive medicines that the NHS was not funding. In part, it was a political response to repeated negative headlines about patients being denied treatments. Nearly 100,000 patients received drugs, but the study in the journal Annals of Oncology found just 1 in 5 treatments delivered a significant benefit, extending life by an average of 3 months. Researchers say it was an example of policy made on the hoof, and it failed.
The Cancer Drugs Fund was a major missed opportunity for the National Health Service and for the cancer community to learn in the real world about the actual impact of new medicines. A great deal of money, over £1 billion, was expended on this, and we did not collect the data to look at individual cancer patients, and that's a huge missed opportunity.
The study concludes many patients may have suffered unnecessary side effects from drugs. But a leading breast cancer charity said the fund has had a totally transformational impact for many, offering precious extra time with loved ones for terminally ill patients. The fund was brought under the remit of the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence last year, so there is greater scrutiny over which treatments are approved. Fergus Walsh, BBC News.
The time is 16 minutes past 1 and our main story this lunchtime. Police say they've foiled an active terror plot in London. One suspect, a woman in her 20s, was shot and is in a serious condition. Still to come, they're off. Cycling's 3-day Tour de Yorkshire has got underway this lunchtime.
Later on BBC London, from Star Wars Stormtrooper to the Old Vic stage, we talked to John Boyega about his new leading role. And we're keeping our fingers crossed for good bank holiday weather. We'll have a full forecast in just a few minutes.
Now, MPs have accused the car maker Vauxhall of showing a reckless disregard for safety over the way it handled a series of fires on its Zafira B model. A report by the Transport Select Committee found the company was too slow to act, especially when it allowed people to drive in cars which were still a hazard. Our transport correspondent Richard Westcott reports.
From driving along normally to an inferno in just a few minutes. Family cars bursting into flames out of the blue. Even Vauxhall says it's lucky no one was seriously hurt.
That's my mirror, completely melted.
Claire had been next to the petrol pumps when she first smelt burning. She barely had time to react.
Within 30 seconds you could not see the inside of the car for black smoke, and then within 3 minutes it was up in flames. Just by pure luck that our children weren't with us that day, and the fire inspector did say that if we hadn't got out of the car then my husband would have been killed.
This is a Zafira B, one of the affected cars. Now, it's been recalled twice and it's been fixed twice, so it should now be safe. The problems came when drivers started using the heating system. All they had to do was have the fan on settings 1, 2 or 3, and it could potentially overheat. They described smoke coming through the vents, and then within minutes the car could be engulfed in flames. Today's report is scathing about the way the company handled the issue. Vauxhall had let people drive around in cars that were supposed to be fixed, but could, in fact, still catch fire.
It took them a long time to act. When they did act and said they'd put things right, cars were still bursting into flame. And even at that point, they didn't recall the cars fully, and this is totally unacceptable and is putting people's lives at risk.
Vauxhall has apologised to owners. It says safety is its top priority, and it's changed the way it deals with recalls to speed things up. Now MPs are calling for new laws to prosecute car makers who fail to sort a safety issue quickly. Claire just doesn't want anyone else facing this.
We just want it safe. We just want everybody to be safe and nobody to have to go through what we went through, because it was a horrible experience.
Richard Westcott, BBC News.
President Trump has again warned that a major conflict could break out with North Korea over its nuclear and missile programs. Mr. Trump did say he would prefer a diplomatic outcome to the dispute and appeared to be more sympathetic towards Kim Jong-un. He also praised his Chinese counterpart, saying he was trying very hard to put pressure on North Korea. Pope Francis has arrived in Egypt for a visit aimed at bringing a message of peace and reconciliation. He'll show his support for Egypt's Christian community in the aftermath of bomb attacks on churches that have killed dozens of people. There'll be tight security arrangements, but in keeping with his desire to be closer to the crowds, the Pope won't make use of an armoured vehicle. The husband of a young mother who died in a mental health unit has said the conclusions of an inquest jury have provided some justice for his wife. Antiques Roadshow expert Alice Gibson-Watt died in 2012, and a jury found that neglect and gross failures by staff at Lakeside Mental Health Unit contributed to her death. In his only interview after the inquest concluded, Anthony Gibson-Watt spoke to the BBC's Sarah Campbell about the impact her death has had on her family.
It does have a name, it's rather long, beginning with B, and the name.
An expert in the field of jewellery. 2 years after this episode of the Antiques Roadshow was shown, Alice Gibson-Watt gave birth. She was 34 years old, and according to her husband Anthony, she was enthralled by motherhood. He's waited 4 years to find out what went so catastrophically wrong after the night he awoke to find her screaming and shaking their 4-week-old baby.
I was terrified, absolutely terrified. I had no idea what was going on. Alice was clearly out of her mind. When there's a young child involved as well, one's natural instinct is to protect your baby.
Alice was violent and delusional, convinced their daughter was dead. She was diagnosed as suffering from postpartum psychosis. It affects approximately 1 in every 1,000 new mothers, half of whom, like Alice, have no history of mental health problems. She was taken to the Lakeside Mental Health Unit in West London.
I was so relieved when I got a call from the consultant doctor that evening, who was very erudite and helpful in giving me the reassurance that I needed that she was in the best possible hands.
Alice was assigned a room similar to this, and it was here, 2 days later, that she went into cardiac arrest.
The jury had been told that Alice Gibson-Watt's heart hadn't properly restarted for an estimated time of over 20 minutes. She suffered severe brain damage. The jury concluded that neglect and gross failures by the staff had contributed to her death.
Vital, potentially life-saving minutes were lost. There was a delay in starting CPR as 3 separate members of staff attempted to find a pulse. A defibrillator was brought into the room but not used, and emergency paramedics were delayed as the doors to the building were locked. They eventually broke in.
Immense relief, I'd say, that it's done, and a good job was done on behalf of my wife and, of course, my daughter, who one day I'll need to explain as best possible what happened, so at least we now have some answers.
The West London Mental Health Trust has apologised for the care Alice received and said 4 years on, they're continuing to learn from her death. Sarah Campbell, BBC News.
A former Royal Marines commando, Alexander Blackman, who shot dead an injured Taliban fighter in Afghanistan, has been released from prison. Sergeant Blackman had originally been found guilty of murder, but his conviction was reduced to manslaughter on appeal last month. Duncan Kennedy reports.
It was just after midnight Alexander Blackman was driven out of jail, having served more than 3 years of his 7-year sentence. Sitting on the back seat, his head covered by the white blanket, he was taken away for a reunion with his wife Claire. For fellow Marines who've campaigned to get Alexander Blackman released, this was a moment for satisfaction.
Long journey, long battle, tiring battle, but it's amazing. And especially this morning to see Al and Claire together has made the last 3.5 years worthwhile, without a shadow of a doubt.
This was the reaction of campaigners at the appeal court last month when judges ruled that Alexander Blackman had broken the Geneva Convention by killing an Afghan insurgent, but that his sentence should be reduced, allowing him to be released.
This is the moment we have all been fighting hard for. It's hard to believe that this day is finally here.
It was in 2011 that Sergeant Blackman was shown on this video shooting at injured Taliban insurgent. He was later found guilty of murder. But after a campaign by the Daily Mail and others, new evidence emerged showing he'd suffered horrendous combat stress, and his conviction was reduced to manslaughter. But although that manslaughter ruling meant that Alexander Blackman could be driven out of this prison here in Wiltshire today, the judges made it clear that he had unlawfully killed that Taliban insurgent. They stressed that he was being made a free man, not an innocent one. He's now expected to give his first full public account of what happened on that day in Afghanistan. His time in prison over, his period of adjustment about to begin. Duncan Kennedy, BBC News in Wiltshire.
Now, across the UK, political campaigning is in full swing, and not just for June's general election. Polling takes place on May the 4th for local elections too. In Scotland, voters will be electing councillors in all 32 local authorities. One of the most intriguing contests is in Glasgow. For decades, it was considered strong Labour territory, but now one of the party's last bastions of power is under threat as local and national politics collide. Stephen Godden reports.
On Glasgow's southern fringe sits the ward of Newlands Aldburn. Traditionally, voters here have helped Labour keep control of the city council. But against a busy political backdrop, could that be about to change?
On the face of it, this election is about choosing who's responsible for looking after parks, who's responsible for schools and collecting the bins. But it's become wrapped up in wider national questions like the general election and the prospect of a second independence referendum.
It's Windhill Road's round the corner, yeah.
In recent years, Labour have suffered heavy losses at UK and Scottish elections. Once known as Red Clydeside, Glasgow City Council now represents a last bastion of power for the party.
See how it goes. The fixation that the Conservatives and the SNP both have with the independence referendum issue is something which can confuse people about which election they're actually fighting on. We're fighting this election, the council election. We're saying send a clear message to the SNP and the Conservatives that we've got the best plan for the city.
I'm going to get it put up the road.
Canvassing nearby, their biggest rivals. For the SNP candidate, it's a far cry from when she joined the party, when the Labour vote had to be weighed rather than counted.
We are on the verge of another great happening. This taking of Glasgow, the Citadel, gives us wonderful credibility, and credibility is what we need. We have a lot of it already, but this is the big one. And don't forget to vote. And there's one for your daughter.
But SNP ambition could be thwarted by what previously might have seemed unthinkable. Emboldened Conservatives
We'll also need to finish off the other side of
finding favour with Glasgow voters.
And that's us. For the very first time, across Glasgow, and lots of doors actively considering us. They want to hear from us, they want to hear what we have to say. So there's lots of people who are turning to us, not just in the constitutional question, but actually because they want a strong local councillor, someone who'll focus on the ward, on the area.
The sixth election in 3 years for Scots voters will soon be settled. Time then for some brief respite before number 7 rolls around. Stephen Godden, BBC News, Glasgow.
And here's a full list then of all the candidates for the local election in the ward of Newlands Aldburn. Now, cycling's Tour de Yorkshire has started this lunchtime in Bridlington. The 3-day event came about after Yorkshire hosted the opening stages of the Tour de France in 2014. Large crowds lined the roads back then, as you may remember, and similar scenes are expected over this bank holiday weekend. Our correspondent Phil Bodmer is on the course in Pocklington. Let's take a look. How's the mood then? It looks like a good turnout already.
Time to go. He's nervous, he's nervous.
Yes, it is, Kate. Quite a decent turnout here in Pocklington as the crowds line the marketplace here. If we just sweep round, you can see just how many people have come out to enjoy this spectacle. As you say, they left Bridlington less than an hour ago, and in the next few minutes they're expected through this main marketplace. The route takes them in through Driffield, through to Pocklington, before heading up into North Yorkshire. And along that route, of course, some pretty evil climbs as well, including the Côte de Gothland, which is notorious climb up on the North York Moors. They'll go into Whitby and then head down via the Coast Road, Robin Hood's Bay, and eventually into Scarborough's North Bay at around 4:45 this afternoon. But this is a race which seems to get bigger every year. 2 million people turned out, they say, last year, and this grew, of course, in the wake of the Grand Départ, which Yorkshire hosted back in 2014. So a big event today. We're expecting the races through here anytime soon, but when they do come, what a Yorkshire welcome they'll receive here from Pocklington. Kate, back to you.
Lovely, thank you very much indeed. Enjoy that. OK, it is time for a look at the weather. We're joined by Matt Taylor. Hi, Matt.
Hello there, Kate. Fine conditions there in Pocklington. These are the scenes up the road in Pickering for the Tour de Yorkshire, and the prospects look good for stage 1, 2 and 3. A bit more sunshine breaking through this afternoon. Sunny spells to take us through the weekend. What you will notice, though, strengthening breeze, and it gives us a flavour of the bank holiday weekend forecast for all of us. A bit of a complication comes on what's going to happen to this cloud. But that's a few days away out there at the moment. Well-broken cloud across most parts of the UK. It's producing the odd shower here and there, particularly across some western areas, a few spots in the south as well. But some of that cloud will continue to break up. Sunny spells will win through for just about all. Some lengthier sunshine as well across some parts of East Anglia later. And of course, with lighter winds than yesterday, it's starting to feel that little bit warmer. The exception pops to eastern Scotland and northeast England. Temperatures still here around 8 to 10 degrees. Now into tonight, the showers that do have quickly push away, and then it'll be a clear night for most. A bit of rain in the Hebrides admittedly. Most though will be dry, and with the clear skies around, it will turn a touch cool across parts of rural Scotland, northern England and Wales. On the hills could be a touch of frost, but most a frost-free start to the bank holiday weekend. A little bit on the cool side, but it's a weekend that gets that bit warmer than we've seen this week. The breeze picking up, and yes, there'll be a chance of rain, but it's only a chance. Many of us spend at least 2 of the days dry, if not the whole lot. And when you consider these and sort of average temperatures this time of year, around 13 to 16 Celsius, we'll never be far off that. So it's a bank holiday weekend forecast, which actually doesn't look too bad. And it certainly gets off to fine fettle. We've got lots of sunshine around on Saturday. Early morning rain in the Hebrides clears. The breeze picking up, coming from a southerly direction. 1 or 2 isolated showers, but most will be dry. And by this stage, we could be seeing temperatures around 13 to 17 or 18 Celsius. The warmest day of the week so far, and it has been a rather cold week. And it should stay fine into the evening. Not often I give you a boxing forecast, but for those heading off to Wembley outdoors, it should stay dry with clear skies. And then that complication I mentioned, that weather front, well, that's this, developing area of low pressure into Sunday. Now that could start to bring rain in through the day across southwest England, Wales. Not going to rain all day long, but by the end of the day, maybe reaching London, Birmingham and Belfast, the time amounts of rain may vary. Most though on Sunday having another dry day, a breezier day than Saturday, so it might feel a touch cooler. And it looks like some of the rain will go across the south during the night, pushing its way northwards into northern England, where it will fizzle out during the day Monday. Sunshine and showers for England and Wales, which means many will avoid it. And I think parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland may stay dry throughout the bank holiday weekend. Best in the west though here with the sunshine out, and really in the sunshine wherever you are this weekend out the breeze, it should feel quite pleasant. Kate.
Matt, thank you very much indeed. Before we leave you, a reminder of our main story this lunchtime. Police say they've foiled an active terror plot in London. One suspect, a woman in her 20s, was shot and is in a serious condition. Now, in the past few minutes, breast surgeon Ian Patterson has been found guilty of 17 counts of wounding with intent by a jury at Nottingham Crown Court after being accused of carrying out dozens of unnecessary operations. There'll be much more on that on the BBC News channel in just a minute. That is all from the BBC News at 1, though. It's goodbye from me and the team here on BBC One. We'll join the news teams where you are. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Good afternoon and welcome to BBC London News. I'm Sonia Jessup. Campaigners claim that controversial plans to build the Garden Bridge over the River Thames are dead this lunchtime, after the Mayor said he would not support the project. Sadiq Khan's written to the Garden Bridge Trust, saying he fears it poses too great a financial risk to London's taxpayers. Here's our transport correspondent, Tom Edwards.
This is a huge blow for the Garden Bridge, which is meant to be built here, and its future is now hanging by a thread. As part of its planning permissions, which expire in December, it was meant to have financial guarantees for maintenance and for operation. Well, today, the Mayor pulled the plug on those.
The reality is there is a £70 million funding gap now. The attempts to get pledges is going backwards, not forwards. The pledges the Garden Bridge Trust have are less than they were in spring 2015. In those circumstances, I'm not willing to sign a blank cheque.
Why didn't you kill it day one a year ago?
Because I was clear from day one a year ago. No more taxpayers' money that I'm responsible for being spent. I was clear from day one. I wouldn't sign a mayoral guarantee if it meant more money is being spent down the road. But you've got to be fair.
Those against the bridge always said that it was being built in the wrong place, and they also didn't like the fact that it was using transport funds for building what in essence was a tourist attraction. Campaigners now say the whole